All right, here we go. So, under what circumstances can freedom of assembly be limited? What is your opinion? Should there be limitations on certain assemblies? So, I'll give you guys some time, a few more minutes here, and then we'll go over it.
There's a million times. But are we having a final in here?
No, we'll have a last chapter test. Okay. Yes.
Wake up early to come here.
My God. I have to. If not, then they're going to get rid of finals week. What would you rather have? Be here all day or just for 2 hours?
Yeah, just a few hours.
See.
Just because we didn't come in for freedom class?
The
No.
5 people.
What? Oh my gosh. What's that?
Said that they're gonna require it next year.
For the core classes, I think, yeah. For core classes. So like your electives are just,
This is an elective though.
it's a chapter test. I just said it.
I was gonna say, I don't really care, it's just a test.
I know, but if I don't have something to, scheduled for that day, they're like, because what happens if it's like one day, no teachers decide to have like a final, even if it's the last chapter test?
That would be awesome.
It would be, sure, but then they get rid of it. Yeah, then they'll be like, all right, you guys don't even do them, so guess what? No more final week.
Yay.
Well, yeah, and then.
That's how I
Watch
feel.
something fun.
What's that?
So we should watch something or do something fun.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, I
Yeah.
promise. I promise.
If I'm just that kids who can't go home early anyway.
Yeah,
Do you only promise?
I promised something today. Well, not really. It's more of a joke. It was a nice surprise. Did you tell Katie that?
Oh, Maddie told me that the doc that said LOL, just review or something. Okay, well, I don't lie. We didn't have that test today because I would have failed it.
No, you wouldn't have.
He's like,
You would have been A-okay. I thought it was hilarious. Didn't you guys think?
no, you made everyone so mad.
You should have been relieved.
Zach said it was kind of funny.
Yeah, see? Maddie gets my humor.
I look back and Emma goes, we have a test today.
Yeah.
No. Mr. Rowan, please. I don't want a test, please. I don't want to. I shouldn't take it. I took me off the extra day.
Half the stuff she said, I'm just. Oh. Yeah, you know what? Okay.
She gets mad. We all start talking over her.
All right, here we go. So, freedom of assembly. What is freedom of assembly? What does that mean? Freedom of assembly. You can hold this up this long. No responses? Jaden?
The right of individuals to know peacefully and collectively to express their meaning, beliefs, or plans.
Yes, good job. So this is a gathering over whatever reason it might be, political or, right, it might be an interest group, social group, whatever. A lot of times it's political, and this is a gathering. Sometimes when it comes to maybe a rally or a campaign, right, people assemble for that. Where their interests are welcome, sometimes, maybe not. Right? And you'll have people that maybe go to these assemblies and cause a little harm. Right, or might heckle some other people at the assembly. But this is a get together to share similar beliefs, values, ideals, anything. Anyway, do you think some assemblies should be limited? Do you think some assemblies maybe should not be allowed to meet? What do you think is all right with that?
I said that there should be limitations if the assembly is hateful or harmful.
Okay, so like, go ahead.
KKK rallies.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, so these groups that are hate-filled, that are designed to literally cause damage or harm to another group of people or one person, right? Yeah, we can limit their ability to meet, right? Obviously, if it's private property, it's gonna be tough to do that, right? This is more for like public areas, like a park or a community area. And, obviously on private land, it's one of those things where, again, they can meet, they do, as long as it's not causing harm or damage. But once it gets violent, then done. Right, so yeah, in a public area, right, typically you need a permit if you're going to assemble, right, so that people know exactly what this gathering's about, what they're gonna be discussing, and that they can square around any type of other events that, let's say it's at a park or transportation, right? So that's important. So yeah, a group, sometimes when it comes to maybe the group presenting a clear and present danger, right? So maybe there's a mob forming, right? And violence is starting to show itself, and people are flipping cars, throwing, I don't know, flaming Molotov cocktails into businesses. It's like, oh my gosh, then they should put it down, right? So some assemblies should be restricted, especially if it's causing danger or harm or hate group. Anything else to add, Kate? You had your hand up. Good. All right. So I think we're all on the same page there, right? And yeah, we're gonna talk about a few court cases here today that revolve around freedom of assembly and where the courts kind of aligned with that. All right, so here are your terms for today. Let's get that up and rolling. All right, so precedent, I know I talked about that already. And remember the lemon law? Remember I was saying, okay, so that's like one of those rules that people go by then that sets precedent for later cases. So they'll refer to a court case that was similar, almost the exact same, and say, hey, what was the decision for this? Because then we can set a standard. Does that make sense? So that's what precedent is. All right, go. So heckler's veto. What is a heckler's veto? What does that mean? What is Aura? Okay, good, good, good. So we're gonna talk about a case, Feiner versus New York, where this man was speaking about certain ideas, viewpoints, maybe that not everybody love. And people, you guys know what hecklers are, right? People that try to kind of mess you up whenever you're giving a speech, or let's say you're a comedian trying to get laughs. People are like yelling, "Hey, sit down, you stink, you're not funny," right? And you have the free speech to do that, right? You have the opportunity to do that. And it's your First Amendment right to do that. But at the same time, in a room like that, when a comedian's trying to give, let's say, a funny joke, or he's getting paid to do this, a lot of times they say, "Hey, shut that guy up and get him out of here." Does that make sense? Um, Also, let's say like a band, right? Let's say a band's playing or performing, and some people are out roughhousing, maybe they're fighting each other, and they be screaming up at the band, it's like, "Hey, take that guy out of here," like he's annoying, right? So there's certain policies and areas, like in an auditorium, let's say, there's musical going on, someone's screaming and yelling and trying to get people to mess up, they'll remove them from the auditorium. Does that make sense? So that happens quite a bit, right? You get people that get a little out of hand or a little rowdy, and even though they're vocalizing their free speech, there's still limits on it. Does that make sense? So like at a baseball game, a kid's baseball game, you ever see South Park? Fat Dad, yeah, the Little League baseball games. Okay, anyway, these two dads go at it, start screaming at each other, like, "These two guys gotta get out of here. This is a children's game." All right, but anyway, heckler's veto is just kind of describing the idea that you have free speech, sure, but depending on the setting, whatever you're saying, especially when you're trying to disrupt a speech or a performance, say it. All right, petition and permit, acquittal, we'll go over here today. And I'm sure you heard those terms before. All right, so we're going to talk about freedom of assembly today. So, real quick. Again, we kind of talked about this already, but assembly is just your right to participate, assemble, meaning come together with a group of people that have a similar interest, value, ideology as you. And you share that. As long as it's not hate-filled, which we talked about, as long as you're not trying to start violence, as long as it's not presenting a clear and present danger. So the court cases we talked today, which is only two, anyway, it just gives an idea here where each group can assemble, maybe not, depending on the situation. All right, so with freedom of assembly, it protects our right to gather in groups for any reason, so long as the assembly is peaceful. And again, we talked about some examples. There's already said about the KKK, that's a good example of this group that, hey, they have really bad values and ideologies. Maybe they shouldn't get together because it could cause harm. Now, if they do it at private property, there's only so much you can do, right? One of those things where, again, if they do it at someone's place that they are a part of, then I guess, even though it's frowned upon. And there are certain areas and jurisdictions where they say, no, that's not allowed, even private property. All right, also have the right to join social clubs, political parties, labor unions, and right to parade and demonstrate in public. So the one court case that we're gonna talk about today is DeJonge versus Oregon. It's in the 1930s. So still that Red Scare, that Red Scare in this early 1900s when a lot of these radical viewpoints, political ideologies come about, like fascism and communism, right? It's one of those things where people start to look at it, try to understand it, and say, "Hey, some of this pretty good, right? Maybe we can go in this direction." And when this happens, well, people in the United States are saying, "Hey, this is radical. You can't be joining in and talking about these certain political ideologies because this could corrupt the United States and break it down from the inside out." So, in other words, a lot of these assemblies get broken up because they're accepting these viewpoints. And with the Communist Manifesto, it literally talks about overthrowing and rebelling against the order if it's not appeasing the people, right? If it's not for the people, I guess, right? Which on its face, you can read it and be like, well, that makes sense. But when it comes to just burning everything to the ground, maybe it's a little too far. All right, so we'll talk about a certain case here today with that. And it's more on workers' rights. And the court case actually didn't really have too many communists there, but anyway, they broke it apart, which we'll mention. All right, provide public order and safety, many states and cities, so when you are assembling for whatever means, a lot of times you gotta cross it over with the township, the city, right? In order to make sure you have a permit for the location, especially if you're in a public area, like a park, right? If you're gathering there to discuss about certain viewpoints, you should square it away and get a permit first before you assemble. So people know what it's about. Also, it's probably important so that people know exactly where to go to hear a little bit more about your ideas. So when it just comes to, word of mouth being spread in the newspaper, obviously nowadays, people go on Facebook, right? And use social media to kind of tell people what's going on. All right, so here's a court case I was talking about. Sorry, DeJonge, Oregon, 1937. All right, there's a man in Oregon. He was talking about workers' rights. And you can imagine the early 1900s, still this industrial age has taken off. And people want to have better working hours, better wage, better benefits, maybe a pension, who knows? And for many business owners, this is not what they want to hear. I throw capitalists, oh man. So in other words, he gathered together with these group of people and he was talking about how life can be a lot better under some of these socialist ideologies, some of the socialist viewpoints. And during a time in America, during the Red Scare, that was unacceptable. That was taboo. That was unbelievable, right? And still to this day, people look at that and say, hey, that's kind of crazy talk there, or this political viewpoints. Again, more accepted today than back then. But as he was joining together, he didn't talk anything about violently overthrowing the government. He was just mentioning about how workers' rights should be a little bit more apparent, right? People should be embracing that a little bit more and fighting for these workers' rights, for better pay, better time off, and safety in the workplace. Like I mentioned, there really weren't too many communists there at all. But anyway, in Oregon, the police came and broke it apart and said, hey, these communists are trying to tear down the nation. And they're trying to use their power and this law that was established in Oregon to break apart these types of meetings. Anyway, they went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, hey, Oregon doesn't have the right to create a law that prevents people from assembling. Goes against their First Amendment right. So with the Supreme Court, they actually sided here with DeJonge and said, this was wrong. Oregon cannot create a law that goes against people's First Amendment right. So it's kind of like one court case we talked about with freedom of speech, the anarchy clause. I don't know if you guys remember a little bit about that one when we talked about what they mentioned about I mentioned about a court case where they created a law that was trying to prevent freedom of speech. And obviously, if it's causing danger or harm, then yeah, they can disband. All right, next one, heckler's veto. So Feiner versus New York. Here's another court case that occurred in 1949. So shortly after World War II. And this is kind of like the beginnings here of what we see of the civil rights movement. Anyway, Feiner was about 22 years old. He was pretty young. And he's in New York at the time and New York City. And he's talking to a group of people about how the mayor of New York at the time, and even President Truman, okay, were not accepting of African Americans within American society. So you got to imagine, right after World War II, right, we come together as a country, right? Many African Americans serve in the armed forces, in the military, and they come home and they're still faced with the Jim Crow laws, right? So he's saying, listen, we got to do something here. We got to make sure that we can fight up against this oppression. And more or less, he was targeting Truman, he was targeting the mayor of New York City, and I won't say he was threatening their lives, but it was getting to that point. Does that make sense? So he didn't really threaten them or say that he was going to tear them down or kill them, but it was getting to the point where it was starting to cause a little bit of a violent uproar. So people that came to the assembly with a heckler's veto, right? The hecklers came and said, hey, sit down, no one wants to hear you, right? You're talking a bunch of dumbness. So they start yelling back and forth at each other. And then push comes to shove, a fight's about to happen, right? Fists are about ready to be thrown. And they say, hey, oh, we're done here. And they tear him off the box that he was standing on. And they say, enough's enough. And they break apart the assembly. So Feiner says, hey, you guys can't do that. You guys can't just tell me I'm done with my assembly when I'm not done. Right? I'm speaking here. I'm talking to the people. And they're like, well, you're gonna cause an uproar, cause a fight, right? Violence was about to start, right? Even though what you're saying has a just worthy, cause behind it, right? Not everybody here was welcoming it, and, we're gonna see some violence. So they said because his speech gave it clear and present danger, meaning that there's gonna be a violent uproar behind it, they had to take him off the, let's say, box here. Anyway, if you would have went with the state here in New York and said, hey, listen, guys, I wanna rent out this area here, the park. Right, I wanna try to have some time here in the park to talk about this, and this. Right, then they can schedule it out. And then they can have protection there, right? So police officers are there to make sure that violence doesn't happen. And sometimes you see it, especially on college campuses a lot, where they'll have police forces there that are surrounding the event to make sure that people, hecklers, right, that don't come in and cause damage or harm, right? And if it does get out of hand, they'll say, hey, we're done, cancel it, right? We'll plan this for another time. All right, last thing here. So when it comes to a petition, so when it comes to the government permit, now you can talk a little bit about that. But the right to express one's ideas to the government, right? A petition is a formal document where a lot of times you get people to sign it. So the more people that sign this petition, it is presented to the government saying that they want a different direction, right? They want it to be seen. They want a policy maybe created to, I don't know, protect something. Right, so petitions, in many cases, are signed, formally written out, and they get people to sign it, and the more people that sign it, offers the ability for the government to maybe change policy, or maybe look at a direction for the people that are petitioning the government. All right, you see these every day, right? You see a lot of things through the news or either on social media, where people are saying, I'm petitioning the government on, I don't know, environmental safety, right? A lot of times you see that, right? How it can be a little bit more protective over the environment. So yeah, is there any questions? Good, all right, here's your assignment. I'm gonna have it due Monday, but we'll go over it, okay? So if you get it done, great. I'd like you to look at it at least, but if you don't worry about it too much. Anyway, here it is. It's called, Does the Assembly Deserve a Permit? It's pretty simple, pretty easy. There's only 5 questions, and all you're going to do is read the statement and say if it needs a permit or not. That's it. Okay? Cool.